everybody that missed it, pretty much this is part of the Valley Center Chamber of Commerce Business Series. Sorry about the little mishap, but we want to make sure that you guys know that if you want to be able to see this later on or anything like that, this will also be on the Valley Center Chamber of Commerce YouTube, as well as any future events will also be uploaded on there as well. And if for any reason you guys want to host one yourself and give out information, please email info@vcchamber.com and you will be able to see about what you can share. It doesn't have to necessarily be business stuff. It could be what your business does, just information you would like to share as a community. So with that being said, again, we are building your business with branding in mind. I'm Ray of Tag District. I have been a graphic designer for 10 plus years. Tag District has been running since 2015. It started off as a clothing and accessories. And then I was doing graphic design pretty much on the side all the time after that. So over my many of years of doing this, I have learned several different things and worked with several different places. I have done branding and logos and marketing and all sorts of stuff for SDSU, San Diego Metropolitan Transit System. If you guys are familiar with like their new Pronto payment series, I was a part of that whole launch. Master plan communities similar to Park Circle and Valley Center. If you are in San Diego and other areas, Savita, that's in Mission Valley, and Millennia, that's in Eastlake. Those are both ones that I have worked on as well. So I've worked on things as small as a business card and as big as a billboard. And so I definitely know how much things can change from those pieces, as well as the best way to explain it is how sometimes your branding can fall a little bit if you're not paying attention to all the aspects from big and small. So now that we are here and later on, and I've recently just did my own rebranding, and that's kind of why I thought this was great because it's fresh to me and it'll be fresh with you guys as well. Tag District is now changing to not only be the clothing and accessories company, so all the stuff you guys see behind there, and we can show you guys that later. It is also my way of helping small businesses. I've seen so many and helped people on the side in between, but now that I'm kind of stepped out of my corporate world lifestyle career, I am now wanting to help people directly. So Tag District has been rebranded to not being just clothing and accessories, but now a maker company. That means that not only am I going to help you with your branding and your logo, but I'm going to try to get you from digital to print to making things. So if you want something as simple as your name on a pen, we can get you there. If we're not manufacturing it ourselves, we have the sources to be able to show for other people, as well as if you're looking for PR boxes, even if it's something for your own stuff, you're doing a wedding, anything like that, we want to be the people you go to for creative solutions. Okay, so today's topics, we're going to go over what branding is versus what a logo is, because that is a very misconception that keeps happening. What I feel like you need in your essentials branding kit, and then ways that we can also build it, and file types, where to use your branding, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that people just think this is what you need. I'm going to be able to at least kind of break it down for you so that you at least know where you're going when you're using this stuff. Okay. I think a lot of people sometimes forget that just because you're not in the room doesn't mean that your business can't still be speaking when you've left. So your brand is working even when you aren't. So if you can leave a business card behind and it is a really good business card, people will keep talking about it. If you have a shirt on and people saw it and they're wondering why, versus asking you, they're automatically going to look at it. So things that we want to make sure that even when we're not speaking for our businesses ourselves, that it is continuously able to speak for us when we're not in the rooms. Knowing that it is going to be your first impression, your last impression, the things that kind of people understand and know. Branding goes deeper than just your mark. It can be your whole personality, it can be the whole thing. So that's why we want to make sure that it is important that you're building your business with the branding in mind. So, what is branding? Branding is going to be the overall identity of your business. This does not stop at just the logo. It is going to be how your business feels, looks, how you talk to people. We want to know that you have a separate personality. Not all the time are people talking with a sense of professionalism in their everyday lives. So you want to make sure you have the right professional voice for your business, things like that, that we want to make sure that we're keeping thinking about. And it can truly make or break you. I've had people who have amazing logos, but when you meet them in person and they try to hand you something, they're giving you low quality things. They're not presenting themselves in the best manner. That's a part of your branding, whether you want to think about it or not. Every interaction, every time you leave something, people are going to talk about and ask about it. So a logo is going to be the mark. We're all familiar with like big brands like Nike, Apple, Amazon, and we all understand that we have seen them in different shapes and forms, but all of their marks that you're going to see is going to be what we consider a logo. And then your brand is going to be everything around it. The colors, the pieces, the formatting, all of that kind of stuff, that's all going to be a part of it. So your logo is what I'm going to say from, you're going to hear me say this a lot throughout the whole thing. Your logo is going to be your face. Your branding is going to be the rest of you, your personality, the things you like, you dislike, things that you want people to be able to think about you when they're not, and then things that like little things. Like if you're somebody who doesn't like seafood, that's a part of your personality. We're going to have things in your branding that's going to be like the, I don't like this, but I do like this. So there's so many different factors that make up your brand. On the basic level, your logo, your colors, your fonts, your voice and your tone, your imagery, your feel, and so many more things. I know a lot of people don't think about their mission statement being a part of their branding. That's a big part of it. The way that you operate, even the way you pick up your phone. I used to work in retail at a place called Charlotte Russe. And I remember every time we picked up the phone, they had a branded way for us to pick up the phone to make sure people knew what the sales were going on, what they were all about, and what time period of clothing we were selling at the time period. So if it was summer, we had to mention that it was summertime and that we were selling these things. And those are all part of the overall branding of the space. So again, like I was mentioning, brands that we already know, Nike. If you think about Nike, you might automatically thinking about the swoosh, but also you might be thinking about the spelling, the Nike. But we also know that they have this phrase that everybody knows, the just do it. And it's something that's going to motivate you, keep you going stronger, creates that sense of athleticism. And we think of it as a general thing. But when we start going into the finer details of Nike, they also market themselves and brand themselves differently for women, for men, for children, for colleges. And they make sure that in those respects and those aspects, they talk about themselves in a specific way. So when we are thinking of Nike, you probably have your own version of what you're thinking. It's probably not going to be the same thing as somebody else is thinking because you may not have been in the same market that you're being branded to. So you're getting this feeling of looking at a swoosh, and now when you see that swoosh, you automatically think Nike. That isn't necessarily inherent. They did that through strong pushing in of the Nike and the swoosh together to where you know that's who they are. So I'm going to show you three different examples of logos, all of them that so that can kind of break down how they work differently. So a logo is going to be the visual mark that represents it. It can come as a symbol, a word mark, or a combination of the both. And think of your business as like the signature, again, the name. You're going to write Rachel Stewart on your stuff because if that's my name, that's what I'm writing down. These are going to be what you're going to consider your signature. This is why we want it on everything to verify it is you. In this case, we have Ray of Light Therapy, where it has the smaller words at the bottom and the bigger icon on the top. We also have different versions of this logo so that they can have it vertical, horizontal, so they can have it on big and small things. But also in some cases where she just wants the icon on the top, you will look at that, and if you know Ray of Light, you'll know that that's her. So even if she's not in the room and you see it, it gives you a sense of sunshine, happiness, everything like that, and brings you all in. And at least that way, she has variation for the different things that she needed. For Aeon Machining, we have pretty much what I would consider more of a typographic mark. Yes, it has a partial of an icon, but even with that, the needmachining.com is their tagline. But it also is because that's the main part of their branding that they want to go forward with. So that way you notice and remember Need Machining more so than Aeon Machining. When you go in, needmachining.com, you can automatically type it in, go straight to the website, and now it's spread to everybody. So in some cases, they only use the top part. And then on other cases, they just put needmachining.com and that's their whole part. So when I am trying to explain to people, yes, you have a logo, you don't have to necessarily always have just one. You can be a Nike and have different parts of it that build it to in the way that you need to use it. For me, for Tag District, I mainly always use this one. It's easy, it's simple, it's in a square. But there are times where it doesn't always work out for me. So I make sure I keep things consistent, like the typeface. And that way I have it Tag District written out, and you will most likely see it that way without anything else. So that way I can still use it for other situations. Okay, so one logo, many uses. That's our goal, but we don't always hit that. But if we are, you're going to want to make sure it works everywhere. So I always tell people, if you can. And sometimes graphic designers are already doing this on their own, but you may want to ask them to do this if you ever need them to do anything for you. Have them size it at like 0.5 inches and then go up from there. And I know there's a certain part where, like, obviously getting things printed super huge is not necessarily going to be as feasible. But if you can get onto an 8.5 by 11 and print it as big as possible, that'll give you the visual range of what it's going to look like from small to big to at least big enough to where most people are going to be printing. The reason is because you may have something really great and really skinny font, and now it's not readable. And you may want to go with just a partial of it so that people can see it as the identifying parts. So when you're on social media, they give you that little tiny icon. You may not want to put the whole thing in there because it's not going to be as recognizable. So you may want to use parts of your logos to make it make more sense. And also too, with that, sometimes it's not necessarily about your logo itself, but the file types that you are giving or getting. And we'll talk about that later on, but we want to make sure that when you are using your logo, you make sure you also have the correct file types. People online, if I got to you, you guys should have this worksheet. And then you guys also, that's the worksheet that's going to give you kind of more of a breakdown of the file types. We'll talk about that later, but at least that way you guys know that's what that's for. Okay, so these are the things that I will tell people of all the things you need in your branding essentials kit. These are the 4 things just to make sure you have to get you on a good starting basis. Have your logo in black and white if it's in a color logo. Make sure you have a color palette to choose and your fonts. I know it sounds super simple, but a lot of people will only have just the first one. We want to make sure that you are consistent and you are able to provide this information to anybody else. I was working for San Diego Metropolitan Transit System. It would sometimes involve us getting things in from other people to have, like, for bus cards and all sorts of things, and they would ask us to do the designs. Well, if I don't know your colors, it's not going to show up right. It's not going to look okay. It's going to be kind of off because I have none of this information. You could be a branding that only has red, and I started using yellow and blue and every other color in the world. Same thing with your fonts. Yeah, maybe not everybody's going to notice it, but over time, sometimes people start feeling that inconsistency. It's kind of an unconscious thing. Designers feel like we're the only ones that really care about font, but I've seen people unconsciously respond to people's brandings indirectly, not understanding if that's them or not because it felt inauthentic and it didn't feel connected or consistent. So things like fonts and colors are things that people look over and not realize it matters. Okay, so let's dive deeper into logos. So we want to make sure you have that primary logo, that main version, and we want to make sure it's the version that you're probably using the most. So your website needs to have it at least once. I would say is if you are using any giant marketing signage for your businesses, you want to make sure that is probably the first thing people see. You want to make sure that's the one that you're always using. In cases where you may want it on a shirt and you're like, this doesn't necessarily fit on a shirt right, or it just looks awkward, or I want to put it on a car or a truck, there are times where your logo is not going to look good. A common mistake some people make with their logos is they will try to put their logo in embroidery and they have a gradient. And if you've ever met somebody who has embroidered and you tell them, I want this in a gradient, they will probably tell you to go away. Just because that's hard to match and hard to do. So we want to make sure that we're having these, like, solid pieces that we know we're always working with. And I'm not saying you can't use gradients or you can't do things. Just make sure that you, when you're using your primary logo, you're using it, but you have a secondary one that works in different situations. One of the things of why I always emphasize the black and white is when people are doing newspaper prints, receipts, stamps, all sorts of things, they forget that it's a one color type of thing. And so we want to make sure that the black and white is a very important part of it. And again, a lot of people are thinking this should be pretty common sense. You'd be surprised on how many people will send you a logo and it turns into a completely black square because it just disappears because they didn't realize that there were so many layers to their logos. So, color palette. McDonald's is going to be the best one that I always use because their yellow and their red is supposed to be kind of like this quick in and out and also make you hungry. There's a specific psychology around colors, and there's a specific psychology around how people interact with branding, and they're very interconnected when it comes to colors. I specifically for my branding only use black and white, and that's because I know that I want to keep it clean and versatile. But for special occasions, like for me, Breast Cancer Awareness Month is pink. I will sometimes change my logo for that factor so that people know that this is a special moment for this logo to be the way it is. The one thing I will say I keep consistent is that it's always a single color for me. That way I can do those changes. If you ever see my logo in two colors and it's not like a deliberate, supposed to be a flag or for some other reason, I could tell you it's not me in a minute. I can also tell you most of the time, though, you're always going to see the black and white. For other people, they have like 3 or 4 colors in their logo, and that's completely fine. But we want to make sure that we identify what your primary colors are and your secondary colors. For me, my primary colors are going to be black and white, but for times where I'm using additional colors, it is going to be this gold color, this gray color, as well as sometimes additionally a green, but I rarely use it. But in these cases, you can kind of see this is my color palette. And then color codes. This is a little bit of a hard topic for people to understand, but we're going to try to break it down as easy as possible. In the digital world, colors are represented differently than when they do in print. Everybody is familiar with CMYK. That is going to be your basic colors of printing. Those don't always transfer the same as online. So we want to make sure that we have your colors for your logo in all of these different versions to make sure that it can translate correctly. The hardest color I think to print, and this is after, again, 10 years of working with different print shops, being in the print industry and doing it myself, some of the hardest colors to print is red and orange. And if you do not have your colors in these numbers, I will guarantee you somebody's going to guess it and they're going to get it wrong. Because those are such hard colors to print, you want to make sure that you give them enough information. My go-to for printing, I always tell people, is Pantone. That's not always easily accessible. And I understand that. If your printer does not have a Pantone book, I completely also understand. I would think it's weird, but again, definitely very possible. And for Pantone, that is going to be like your universal code for measuring color, similar to the metric system and the imperial system of measurement, where we know that this is a foot, this is a meter. We know understand those both. Pantone is going to be that verbal cue for you to know that that's your number. Not everybody has that. Again, I chose black and white. I didn't want to have to always deal with Pantone because I knew it was going to be more frustrating for me in the long run. So I just tell them the blackest black you can get. And obviously, if it's white and it's on a white piece of paper, just print it that way. But we also want to make sure for printing, if we cannot provide them with that bottom one, which again is very common, CMYK is going to be your best bet. And you want to make sure that your numbers are completely visible to be able to hand them and say, this is the colors, what it should get. You might get a little bit of offness, but most likely you're going to be more better off and set on. RGB is going to be used for digital displays. It's going to portray a little bit differently. If you have the biggest noticeable is when you have like neon colors, that kind of thing shows up a lot different. And then hex code is also for digital and web and probably going to be your most commonly asked. I would say as of like 7 years ago, I would not have said that, but now hex is becoming like a more common thing because people are using it more. Some printers will also ask you for the hex code because they know it's becoming more common. So I just tell people, at least if you can have the top three, Pantone, we could try, but if we don't have it, it's okay. But if we can at least get those top three, that would be your best of luck of trying to get things to match exactly. That way, at least you're not going in being like, that doesn't look anything like my colors. Okay, now fonts. Again, it's one of those visual things that I think people don't unconsciously know that they're looking at. We're looking for legibility, notability, and way for it to be used in different fashions. For me, my primary font is going to be like this one, what you see here, which is how Tag District's written. I have one that's called, that font's called Courier New. In cases where I do not have that, I do have a secondary backup font. It's called American Typewriter. It looks not exactly the same, but pretty gosh darn close for anybody who's probably not paying attention. If I immediately started writing Tag District in this font, people would be like, that's probably not her, unless there was a reason for it. So if I'm typing it out in a document, most likely it's going to be in this font. But in cases where I can actually make it stand out and like show up more visually, you're going to know it's me based off of those letters. Secondary font, you're going to use that for more of like your website body texts, when you're writing stationery, things like that. Those are things are consistent. Some people are maybe not necessarily as much of a stickler on it, but I would suggest If you want to keep things looking, again, consistent, because that's our main goal in this, a secondary font is useful, and an accent font, definitely very optional. I use my primary font as my accent font, but I know that people have like cursive fonts, and cursive is becoming one of those things of some people can read it, some people can't. So you may not want it as your always, but it can be for just a decorative visual response to it. Okay, so I get this question a lot, and people are always asking me what kind of file types and what do I need and why does it look this way and what do I ask my designer for? We're going to start off with vector, raster, and just kind of what we're going to think about when we're using them. The pamphlets or the little workshop things I gave you breaks down a little bit more where you can know specifically what you're going to use each one for, but I'm going to just explain to you so that you know what people are going to be asking for. A vector file A vector file is going to be something that can be scaled. Most of the time, a graphic designer is going to draw your logo in a vector file. It is going to make it to where they can make it super large and it has all this flexibility. So we're going to think of it as like bubble gum or a rubber band. It can stretch super far and kind of really just go out to wherever it needs to, and you're not really worried about it. Versus a raster file, you're going to have it pretty concrete in its little tiny pieces. So photos are kind of that way. So if you've ever seen like a billboard up close, you see all these little tiny dots. That's what it's reading. And so when you kind of stretch it beyond it and it's not sized for the moment, you're going to get a lot of blurriness. If you send logos as JPEGs and PNGs, you can see the difference from when they're really tiny to really big. So if you are looking at something and you're handing somebody a JPEG and they're going to put it on a black background, you're going to see that white box around the outside. But if you have a PNG, it has a transparent background, it can normally be placed anywhere. So in those cases where the raster files kind of come in handy more so, those ones are going to be also things that are a little bit more accessible. The vector files, not as accessible, but honestly probably going to be asked for more in your cases of manufacturing. So use vector logos as much as you can, and then use raster files for like photos, that kind of thing. You can use them again for other situations. You can send it to people that way. There's not a big deal, but I would suggest if you want to make sure your stuff is being presented in the best way and you're not sending heavy, crazy, huge files, you want to make sure that you're at least thinking about vector versus raster before you send your file. Okay, so when we're looking at it, where does your files land? If you have an AAI, an EPS, or an SVG, you're going to be in the vector files realm. If you have a PNG, JPEG, TIFF, GIF, you're in the raster files, and then the universal is a PDF. I have a caveat with PDFs, so I'll explain that a little bit later, but just remember that these are going to be kind of your thing, and I would treat the word universal kind of loosely on this. So your branding, we want it to go everywhere. It isn't just for your logo, it shows every single touch point on it. So it's everything that we want to show what your branding is about and who your business is. And every time someone sees it, hears it, or interacts with your business in the branding moments, if it represents your business, your branding goes on it. I say this because sponsorships are a big thing that a lot of businesses like to do to be able to give back in their ways and have their names out there. But if you send out a logo that does not look correct or right, it can look fuzzy. And now that's a representation of your business. And even though you may have given it to a sponsor and they try to do the best with it, it's going to look not as good on you versus the person you sent your info for the sponsorship. So I always tell people with those file types, if you can and the person can accept it, send an EPS, send an AI. If they're working with marketing that doesn't have all of that stuff, a PNG is great. Just make sure it's kind of on the bigger side. SVGs kind of too, some people can read them, but this is where a PDF kind of comes in. Depending on how your designer designed the file, a PDF can no longer be vector if they flattened it. It makes it into an image. Most of the time, people aren't always thinking that hard, but if they are, just know you can get PDFs that will not work. So if you go to your printer, like Fast Signs, and you tell them, hey, I have this PDF of my logo, it works. And they're looking at it and said, no, it's not. And you're like, well, it's a PDF. You said it should work. The reason is because your designer said, nope, flatten the whole thing. You don't get the logo anymore. It's not vector. It's just a JPEG now. Okay, so when we're thinking about the different placements, we're going to use raster for more of the digital placements. So Website, social media, email signatures. We want to make sure that file's super tiny so that way it doesn't load down your emails. Email newsletters, same thing. We want to make sure those are a little bit smaller. Normally they're viewed on screens that are always kind of this big. I'm odd where I have really big screens for all of my stuff, but most of the time everything's going to be shown super small. So we don't need to make those heavy. Um, when we want to do like online shops, same thing. They can be a little bit bigger, but realistically for digital, we can stick with the raster and we can have them really small. It makes your stuff run better. If you can get it as a PNG, you have a clear background and you know it's going to run better if you know it's sized to the right size. Um, if you're familiar with photos and like the sizing, it'd be like 72 DPI is going to be mainly what people use for screens. I personally do not use 72. I use 150 because it's that happy medium between the two. That way I know if somebody grabs my logo, they're at least getting something somewhat okay to print. And then 300 is going to be your best, your prettiest, your brightest. You could technically go up higher to like 600, 900, but people don't really do that unless they're doing something super crazy big. Most of the time, we're staying in, as us in general, in our world for right now, 72 to 300. But in these cases, we're going to stick with 72 to 150. And then for print placements, this is going to be where my bread and butter is from growing up in my design career and knowing what has definitely got us stuck is so when you're doing your print placements and you want things to be printed, we again want those vector files so that they look the cleanest, the greatest, the best. That way I can size it and I don't have to worry about it warping too much or anything like that. Side note, if you ever have your logo and you give it to somebody and it's stretched, immediately tell them to stop it. Immediately grab it back. I've seen people's logos stretched and pulled and you can no longer read it and it doesn't look identifiable. And we want to prevent that as much as you can because again, consistency is key. And the way you're presenting yourself, it's not going to say anything about the person who did it. It's going to say everything about the business logo that they're looking at. So we want to make sure when we're getting things printed that they're being able to scale through all these different parts. So small invoices, black and white, we want to make sure they're nice. Letterheads and contracts, again, they're going to be a little bit bigger. And then things like banners and signage, really big, 2 feet, 3 feet, 60 feet. They could be all the way up in the air. We want to make sure your stuff is looking the best it can. And when you scale things up, if you were to scale a JPEG up about 30, 40 feet, 30, 40 feet in the air, and it's going to be about 20 feet wide, you probably are not going to get it to look good if you could send them a 72 DPI. It's just not, it's going to look blurry. It's going to look gross. You're going to have all this feedback around it. You want to make sure that you're giving them the right file so that they can print stuff well. And then my next thing is saying for branding and merchandising and storefront signage, all that stuff. Again, manufacturers are going to be a little bit different. There is a file type that I did not tell you guys about that's not on your thing. You're going to be asked this on very rare occasions, depending on who you're going to. The reason I say this is because Need Machining, they ask for DXFs. It is because the machine, that's what it reads best, and for the CAD tools. So we want to make sure that when we're asking our manufacturers what they can use, and on some occasions where we can't give them exactly what they need, we want to make sure we're giving them the closest things possible. Again, the reason I didn't say a DXF because it's so rare when you're getting asked for it, depending on what you're doing. But if you're kind of sticking in these more like these kind of realms, you might get asked for like embroidery files. Some people should be able to make those, but I've been asked for like direct embroidery files, and I'm like, okay, guess I got to go make that. Or storefront signage where you're getting laser cutting and different things like that. We want to have vector files. If you hand somebody a JPEG, they cannot cut it from that. So these are a lot of kind of things that people don't always think about. There was a printer that I recently just got, and I saw a bunch of people trying to print a bunch of things, and they're wondering why it's not looking right. It's because they were throwing in JPEGs that took on their phone, and they thought it would look great and amazing, and they tried to blow it up to, this big, and automatically everything was blown out. You could barely tell what was on the picture. So when we're thinking about all of these different things, not everybody thinks about branding extending to all of this, but it extends further than just a piece of paper you're handing to somebody. Okay. And so I know that it is not always possible to brand everything, but if you can brand everything you can, I am constantly between me and him wearing his stuff. We try to always wear our brands as much as possible, especially in cases where I know I'm going to meet people. If you are out there, try to make sure there's something with it. Your business cards are very important. People overlook them and think that they're not that great. the amount of times I've handed somebody my business card and they were like, wow, this looks intentional, like you really tried, versus I always forget the movie, but there's one where it's like talking about white business cards with like the black lettering and like the touch of the feel of the paper. It was such a interesting moment because everybody's business cards looked exactly the same. And it was like set in the 80s or something. I forgot what the movie was. But anyways, that moment of people looking at that happens in real life. But now we're not necessarily so impressed with white paper or black lettering. We now want to see that you're going a little bit further and actually applying your branding to all of the things beyond it just being your name. Um, I know people talk about having their stuff on cars. Think about your placement. You don't want your logo cut somewhere weird because it may create an image you do not want it to be created. Not everybody thinks about that because you're always seeing your logo in one piece. But if you open a door and now it looks like a child and you have nothing to do with it, it can change the whole vibe of what people are seeing. So we always want to think about how you can brand everything, but also how we can make sure it looks nice in the process. If you are a company that has nothing to do with like cars and you're giving away those car keychain air things and says your name on it, it doesn't connect with people. But if you are a place that does tires, and yeah, you want to make sure you give those out and have your name on them. Little things that we want to customize. Everybody gives away pens, everybody gives tote bags. They're great and amazing, everyone loves them, but also it gets a little boring after a while. So make sure when you are creating these new items, make sure they're connected to who you are as a business. Um, for me, Tag District, I used to do a lot of other things to help people in the community. So there was a point where I was giving away like whistle keychains, so like for protection, or I was giving people small prints when I used to do screen printing of like my art as like kind of like a gift, like picture kind of thing. So there's so many ways you can think about what your merch and where your branding can go. And I always just like to say for people, if you can get a little bit more out of the box, it's more impressive. If you got to stay in the realm, stay in the realm. No one's going to ask questions. But if you want to push a little bit further, think about it and be creative with what you're choosing. And I know I said all of the essentials that we needed. And I know some of you are like, well, how am I going to get also the mission statement? And how am I going to get all of this? And how am I going to get my type and my voice and all of that? I'm going to always tell you to start with your essentials. And it's going to be those four that I was talking about: your logo, your black and white, your color, and your typography. But don't think you have to do that all now. We want to make sure that your branding grows with you. A lot of major brands, and like I was mentioning earlier when I was talking to you about Apple and how they started, they actually, their first logo was Isaac Newton under an apple tree. And it looks like a lithograph, like kind of weird painting. It does not scale well at all. They started off there and then they transferred into different versions of the apple where they were different colors, different shapes and versions to where now it's a little bit more simpler. I think now they added back in a slight gradient or something like that. But they have probably gone through 10 iterations of their logo. But when they first started as Apple, they just said the word Macintosh as well when they were releasing their computer. If anybody's seen the 1984 kind of commercial thing, it was about them expressing themselves the best way. So a part of their branding was to look like the renegade people. Now we see them as this like clean, sleek, futuristic kind of stuff, and that was the evolution of their branding. Just because of this is how you are now does not mean you can't change later. I'm pretty sure all of us don't look the same as when we were 8. And if you do, wow. But if you are like evolving and you change, your personality changes, your likes and dislikes change. The same way we can think of ourselves as being growing, we can always grow our branding. With that being also said, think about it as you don't need everything at once, but there might be things that you want later, and we want to make sure we're keeping that into consideration. So this is why we have our branding wish list. So mission statement and value, some of y'all already have that. But again, it's great to have that in your branding because when somebody looks at it, they kind of understand the vibe you're going for if you're designing stuff for them later. We want to make sure your brand voice and tone, you have a guide for that. Each social media platform can bring in different people. So you want to make sure you cater your voice to each social media. Facebook is, I would say, a little bit more of a older generation, older crowd. Instagram is kind of in the middle. TikTok's a little bit new and fresher. You do not want to use the same voice between all three because obviously then your audience isn't going to be the same. So we want to make sure when we're thinking about voice and tone, it comes down to, again, when you're making that phone call and someone's picking up, how do you answer the phone? Do you answer it with your business name? Do you answer it with what you have coming up? Do you Do you say it with a happy tone? Are you just only strictly professional and there's no funny business here? That kind of thing that we want to think about when we're thinking about the tone. Again, that's really hard to implement from the beginning because you may not know what that sounds like. So give yourself time, have those things. Photography, sound, art direction for things like movies, pictures, marketing ads, that kind of thing. You could really want really dark tones, really light tones, only show people, never show a single person. These are the kind of things that you want to make sure that you're having involved when you're thinking about these things. But again, in no which way or form am I saying you need to have all this stuff in the beginning. These are just things that you may want to think about as your business grows. Because one day you could be starting off small, and next thing you know, you're the next Apple, and now you don't have any of these things to show people who you are. So you always want to think about your branding as something that grows, develops, and moves with you throughout it. It's a giant breadth of things, and we want to make sure that we're always constantly going through it. Okay, so again, start small, dream big. You don't need to have everything launched from the beginning. We want to make sure you have your essentials. Make sure you have things that you may want to focus on as you go. There's things like that. I know for the longest time, I only had my essentials and never did a mission statement as far as like being included in my branding. And the moment I started doing that and had my keywords and values and have all that together in one spot, it made things a lot easier to like explain and talk to people about. Because now I know that anytime people see my colors, I want them to see my colors and think about my mission statement. They're not going to know it exactly, but I want them to feel that through the entire thing. And so, as I'm saying, it always grows. Your brand can truly never be finished. Just think of it as something that's always evolving and growing. If you are not evolving and growing as a business, most likely you're never going to need to change anything. But most of us want to grow. We always want more clientele. We always want to get bigger. We want to become more successful. So if we want to keep things going, we want to make sure that we're not just stopping and just, okay, I'm done it and go out the way. You want to make sure you always are like revitalizing who you are. When I started Tag District, again, it was a clothing business and accessories. I started it off as a school project and the logo was completely different. Um, Now, over the years, I changed it. I sat on this logo for a while, but again, it didn't feel like clothing was enough. Now I've expanded to being more things and being this maker company that I am now. And so during that time, again, been 10-ish, 11-ish years of me doing all this work, and it was always a side business. Now that I'm in a part where I'm wanting to make it sure it's a primary thing for me to help people, I know that I also had to make sure that my branding was completely set because now I'm being exposed to more and I want it to be able to grow. So, your biggest takeaway is your logo is not your brand. So, if you just have a logo and you're not thinking about the other pieces, just know you do not have a brand, you just have a logo. And I'm not saying that's bad, but we want to make sure that we're trying to do that so we have the voice of your business. Because right now, you're just showing people a face. You're never giving people any personality. And realistically, do you want to be friends with somebody you don't know anything about? Probably not. You're going to want to see more than just the face. Your essentials kit and your foundation, and you can build up from there. Those four things can help you be able to grow, and we can start there. You don't have to make sure you rush through it. You don't have to add everything, but if we can have those essentials, that's what we need. And consistency is what's going to turn a brand into something people trust and remember. We know we see these. I know that there's probably plenty of businesses that you guys know. You see the logo and you automatically know, do not buy it. Sadly, sometimes that's how branding can go and it can be a negative on you. But if you want to show any differences, people want to see that. One of the biggest like ones that people talk about in the graphic design world as being kind of this branding fail was JCPenney. JCPenney was like a solid company. Everybody used to go there for school shopping, everything. That was the place you grew up in. Sometime in like I want to say like the mid 2000s, I might be wrong about that. They switched it to just JCP. And even if you called it JCP, the moment they changed their logo and their branding, everything tanked. It made them look cheaper. It made people not trust them. It wasn't the JCPenney that we knew and grew up with. And when they did that, they realized, oh man, we made a mistake. And they had to decide whether they were going to stick with it or whether they were going to move on. I don't remember if they completely changed it again, but I know that it was a big hit to them. And the way that JCPenney is now is affected by that one moment where they changed. And I'm not saying this as a fearful of changing your logo and branding. I'm just letting you know it can be good. It sometimes can be bad. If you know you've built that consistency, you might as well stay with it. Don't try to rebuild it. If you don't have that consistency or you're trying to break old words and things that people recognize from beforehand, toss it, start new, say your new business. So again, if you guys have any questions for me, we're gonna leave it open to see if there's anybody who has any questions. But I also want to guys know down the road, you guys have anything you want consultations about your logos and your branding, just to see where it can go. You have things that you want to be made, PR boxes, that kind of thing. You can reach me at Ray@TagDistrict. You can also go on my website. You can reach out to me that way as well, and you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I will tell you, people, again, different voices. So if you see something a little different on TikTok than you see on Facebook and Instagram, again, different voices. And then, if you guys are also interested in joining the Valley Center Chamber of Commerce, the reason also why I'm here, and I probably know so much about this, is I am currently a board member. It is going to be the end of my term soon. But if you would like to be a part of the chamber, I'm still going to be a part of the chamber because I think it has been a great piece of how I've been able to redevelop over this past year and the support that I've given. So if you have any questions, you want to do a series, you want to be a part of it, info@bcchamber.com is going to be your best way. And I spelled it wrong on there. Or bcchamber.com, and the website is going to give you plenty of information on pricing of memberships. It's going to give you all of the events that are going on. We have events going on in the community that aren't necessarily ran by us, but are ran by our members. All of that is shared. If you are currently a member and you're not sharing your stuff on the website, make sure you start building that. We're going to try to give more information on stuff like that in the future. But again, if you have any questions, make sure you go to info@bcchamber.com to be able to get information, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Okay. And if anybody has any questions, let me know. Anybody have questions on that?
Like, not who is on Kendall's making emojis, but no, there's no question.
That, and if you guys don't have any questions or anything like that, again, if you don't have questions now, message me later. I'll be here, and I read my emails pretty frequently.
Good job, Ray.
Thank you.
Very, very good job. I learned a whole lot. I had no idea.
Also, if you guys want the slideshow,